like to thank everybody for joining us once again for our next rendition of our biweekly webinar. And today we got a special guest, Sammy Giraldo from the Tennessee Soccer Association. It's going to be really neat because this is going to be one that I really look forward to, especially doing as long as I have. He's probably got answers to questions I've had myself for such a long time and mistakes that I've made by not doing the exact thing that we're going to talk about today, which is balancing the professional as well as the personal life, especially when we're doing a job like we do where this takes up so much time, and especially with weekends and nights and practices and whatnot. So like I said, it puts a lot of strain within a family. But that'll kind of turn it over to you for a second, Sammy. Say thank you very much for joining us, and glad you're here.
Warren, appreciate you having me, man. It's exciting to be able to collaborate with another state association. Yeah, just briefly, my name is Sammy Giraldo. Currently serving as the director of coaching for Tennessee State Soccer, as my primary responsibility, and just hoping to have a nice open talk a little bit about work-life balance as a professional in soccer.
Well, and do you mind if we also, if the candidates have or the people that are participating have questions, if you don't mind, can they pop in and ask questions as well as we go through?
Absolutely. I highly encourage questions and look forward to them.
Perfect. All right, so before we start off, why don't we just kind of get a background to kind of let everybody know where you came from, how you got to this point, and really kind of sets up the basis for today's webinar, just to get an understanding of what you've been through to get to here.
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. So, my story begins as many immigrant stories. I'm Colombian. My family moved to this country when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And my father basically came for, as many of us do, for a better life. He went through graduate, postgraduate school, got his PhD here in the U.S. And through that time, we moved through different states. So started off living in Vermont. A lot of my youth was spent in Michigan, on the campus of Michigan State University. And then from about right before entering high school until just a few years back, lived in Texas, primarily based out of Corpus Christi, Texas. And how did I get to my current role, which I think is probably the best starting point for this whole story? How did I get to my current role? Well, I come from a very academic family, as just shared about my father. Uh, I had always wanted to pursue academia in one way or another. As it stands, I went to school, Texas A&M Corpus Christi, then to graduate school at Texas Tech University. During that time, as I was finishing my master's, the opportunity presented itself to go back to Corpus for some time. And I had never stayed too far away from the game. So during that period, I started, uh, for lack of a better term, a soccer development business. Had always been kind of a little bit of a vision of my brothers in mind to start something that used kind of modern science approaches, the latest kind of evidence to better develop soccer players here. And I started that on my own. And within just about a year, uh, it started growing significantly. It opened up a lot of doors right away for me. I was able to convince my brother to come work with me. He was getting his PhD at the time, in sports development from the University of Texas. And basically, that started my journey in soccer. That business grew, started opening up other opportunities, and that's basically, Warren, what led me to start coaching consistently and then get involved in other aspects of the game.
Okay, so as we kind of continue the journey and kind of get the story, because we want to do the work-life balance, at what time did you meet your current family, your wife, and how did it go during that phase of the development of you?
Definitely, Warren. So I am not married, which is probably
Oh.
actually a big part of the story. No, it honestly makes perfect sense to talk about it because I think it's one of the realizations that kind of led me to my current path. So let me maybe give you a little bit broader background on just my family situation. So yeah, I'm obviously not married. My parents are both retired. They now live here with me in Tennessee. And then I only have one other brother. He's my only other family here. He lives in Colorado, works with the Colorado Rapids youth system. And he does the same thing I do professionally. He's involved in soccer in a lot of different aspects. And he's the one that I started our business with about, at this point, about 13 years ago. So that's a little bit of background on my family. Maybe
Oh,
I'll jump into kind of what led to my modern realization and what led me to look a little bit at more work-life balance. Does that sound okay?
No, it sounds great. Not sure. Apologize for making that mistake, but yeah, go ahead.
No,
No, for
it's no
sure.
problem,
That
Warren. Uh,
was a
I
terrible
think
slip.
all part of the story actually. So I think as I started getting more involved in soccer around 2010, a lot of doors started opening really quickly. So I think to start off, one thing that I would like to say is that um, I think to progress in soccer and to progress in any profession, there has to be some sort of level of dedication and sacrifice. I don't ever disagree with that, and I don't think I would have gotten to where I currently am without those sacrifices. Um, my story is a little bit geared towards how can we still achieve these things while finding a little bit better balance, whatever that means to each person. So around 2011, when the business started taking off, many more opportunities. We partnered with local clubs, became the DOC. Within a few years, we opened our own facility. We started working with South Texas ODP, and around that time, I also started educating for South Texas and the Federation when they started introducing their grassroots courses. So it's a lot of things. It's probably every soccer professional that I know is probably when they listen to this are going to be like, "Yep, that sounds about right." So it gives maybe some people who aren't involved in soccer in this way a little bit of insight into how many hats coaches and especially modern youth coaches wear in the modern game. So I was doing all those things, and then I think the icing on the cake in terms of just an overload was around 2016. Um, the USL reached out to me because they were looking to bring a USL2 team for the first time in Corpus. I was hired as the first coach. I was part of being able to put the first team together. Great experience, but again, I think it was just kind of the final straw that just kind of broke the camel's back. It was just too much. So, during that time, a lot of reflections, and what I realized very quickly is that I needed to be honest with myself. And I think the biggest point of honesty for me was that soccer, which is probably the thing that has brought me most joy in my life, aside from friends, family, other things, but just the thing that I enjoy myself, soccer, was no longer fun. And I think the moment I was honest with myself with that began kind of a new journey for me in terms of how to continue to be successful in soccer, but also being able to take time for myself and maybe do some of the things that I would like to do. So that kind of takes me to part two of my story. I think the realization is kind of the first part. The second part was, what did I do about it? Look, to put it frankly, I think I had to have really deep discussions with my family. My parents were recently retired at the time, and them being the only family I have here, I've always had a very strong connection with them and my brother. So the idea was never to be too far. A couple years before that, we had taken a family trip and honestly just fell in love with Tennessee. I think it reminded us just how green it was. It reminded us a lot of Colombia. And for me personally, it had always been a dream to own a farm. And I think my family, especially my father as well, had always been very open to the idea. So through many, many discussions, Warren, we decided to kind of go in together and just pursue a dream right now rather than waiting at some unknown point in the future. So basically spent about 2 years looking for this farm. And during those 2 years, I still continued working full time in soccer. I think just having this new life goal in front of me maybe gave me a little bit of extra energy. But again, I think part of this conversation today is being open about when there's too much on us as coaches. So even though I felt a little bit better during that time, I still realized once I accomplished, hopefully getting this property, I needed to take a little bit of a step away from the game. After 2 years, we were able to settle on a property. I had planned during that whole time to start stepping away from the business. And, you know, what I did maybe isn't for everybody, but it's definitely what gave me a renewed energy and renewed lease on life. So I did step away from the game when I made the move to Tennessee, always with the intent to maybe come back at some point, right? It might have been right away, it might be in a couple of years, but there was no direct timeline. Moving to the property and really doing the things that I like, which are being in nature, honestly, being able to meditate, have a place to where I can congregate with friends and family. I think that changed everything for me. And this, I think, leads to maybe the most important part of the story, which is the third part, which I consider kind of the current act which I'm in. Um, what happened when I finally kind of found that inner peace with myself? And a big part of it, I want to be fully transparent here, Ward, is that there were lots of deep reflections about my personal relationships. I was not married at the time. It's something that has always been a goal. But when you put work as the number one priority, then it's very difficult to dedicate the amount of time that a relationship requires. So I want to be honest that that was a big kind of motivating factor in all of these decisions. So, very quickly being here, it was just a renewed lease on life. As things tend to happen in the soccer world, I got pulled in very quickly. I got connected to Hans Hobson, which is the current CEO of Tennessee State Soccer Association. And within a couple months, I was teaching courses for the federation. Within about a year of being here, Hans offered me the job to take on director of coaching, which was vacant at the time. Um, and I think this is maybe the pivotal moment in kind of my current journey. Uh, I think if it would have been anybody else or any other situation, or most other situations, I probably would not have accepted the job. But there are two things that I think really led me to move to accept that position, and maybe one of the biggest lessons that I want to share with everybody today. Number one, I had found some peace within myself in terms of getting able to explore other things away from soccer. Soccer is my passion, guys. When I'm in it, I want to be 100%, but I realized to do that, I had to be in nature. I had to be on a farm, do something that always been a dream of mine. But then the second part, which is to me maybe the most important one for today, is that I wouldn't have taken that job unless the culture and the people and the person offering it had shared values and had a shared outlook on life and soccer as I did. And I'm always very open with him about this. The culture here is amazing. It's supportive. It allows me to also pursue the things that I like while understanding that when I'm in the job, it's 100%. And I think that's it for me. I think that once you find something that motivates you as much as your work does, because I think we should always be motivated by our work. But if there are other things, then you're always going to be more re-energized. So, Warren, that's a little bit of a snapshot into where I am, but I would love to dig deeper into any of those areas that you might want me to follow up on.
Oh man, I'm so excited. What a great story. In fact, I see a lot of parallels as we look at it. Because and just on my perspective, do you think right now you'd be where you are if you hadn't overloaded in the early days?
Man, Warren, I was hoping you're going to ask easy questions today.
Yeah, no. But that's
Those are
what
the
stuck out.
hard-hitting ones.
Well, and to
I
be
love
honest with
it,
you, I'm
man.
kind of asking the same question I asked myself because I look at our journeys are kind of parallel. In fact, my daughter right now shows animals and livestock. So I mean it's kind of funny that we're on the same journey. And so that's
I
what it
think we're
brought
going to
up. So
have I think we're going to have livestock conversations outside of this as well. But
absolutely.
Warren, yeah, let me share. And again, I think part of what I want to share with everybody is that it's important for us to also break the stigma of the hardships that we face as coaches, especially modern coaches. So to answer your question, I've reflected on this pretty deeply, leading up to this because I knew we were going to be talking about this. And I think one of the realizations that I came to, Warren, and that's why I started off with kind of that statement today, is that I think to be successful in anything in life, there has to be some level of pretty deep sacrifice and some at some point some really deep commitment that's going to obviously limit your time in other areas. So I don't think I would be exactly where I am today if I hadn't have made those sacrifices. And, it wasn't for a short period of time. It was, I would say, for about a period of 10 years straight. It was 12 to 15-hour days and just growing the business and making connections as much as possible. Now, that being said, along with those same reflections that I've had, um, I I think the thing that I wish I had during that time was maybe mentors and other coaches who were more willing and open to talk about their journeys and their hardships exactly. Because what I think is that, okay, maybe I might not be exactly where I am. I could be maybe in another position similar. I could maybe not be as far.
Mhm.
But I think the big message is that it doesn't have to be 100% sacrifice. And I think when you find,
Oh, for
even if
sure.
it's just a little bit of time for yourself, it gives you so much more renewed energy. And I believe that was probably a big contributing factor to my burnout. There was no personal time. It was soccer 100% go, go, go. And um, hopefully we can change the narrative for future generations a bit.
Oh, I love it. And so when you think about it too, and just in the journeys that you go through and the coaches that we had here, how could a mentor have helped that? What did you look at as far as who do you had as mentors at that time, and which were they pushing you? And kind of to stack off that a bit, you know, what would the ideal mentor have looked like if you look back on that same situation back in the past?
Yeah, so number one thing, I've had some great mentors. I just think, as everybody, these mentors, because of the time and because of their personal strength, really were great in certain areas. I think maybe what I lacked and what I would like to see in the ideal mentor for me, and what I would hope for future generations, um, I think is an openness on two things, to be honest with you. Number one, mental health, and I think that's changing just in terms of society. And number two, what are the obstacles that they face? How can we face them right now? And how do those things change generationally? So very specifically, um, what I mean by this is the best way I can kind of get it across is what I would do now with a mentee. One of the big things, and I think this is maybe number one for me, is that I think there's a skewed perspective, especially within the coaching ranks, about what success is. So
For sure.
when I say success, I think it's still very easy to look at TV and to put on a Premier League game or to put on an MLS NWSL game and say, for me to reach the pinnacle of my profession, I have to be coaching in one of those games on TV. I think for me, that's the biggest thing. And because now there are more clear pathways professionally for soccer coaches, whether you want to be an educator, whether you want to be a scout, whether you want to be a coach, go into the administrative side as a GM. There are much more clear pathways. This is starting to change a little bit, but I think the more we as coaches are open about sharing this message that success can mean a lot of different things, and there are now a lot of different opportunities to move into, uh, we can start changing the outlook a little bit in terms of what it takes to get to those areas. Because to finalize this, and I think again we don't talk about this openly enough. If we really looked at the numbers, there's really only a handful of positions in terms of head coaching jobs at professional levels, or even if we bring colleges in, right? And there are way more coaches that exist to actually fill those jobs. So, what is, I think, redefining what success means in our profession and how we can impact the growth of the game are two big areas that I would look for in a modern mentor.
No, I love it. One thing that struck me when you're talking about that, at the end of the day, what is success really? So if you look at the professional, for example, at any MLS club, what's the length of time expected to actually work there? And the turnover rates are unbelievably huge. And so, kind of like an end of life thing, what would you say the definition of success would be now as it's turned from that pursuing that overall goal of being a professional coach to now, when you look back on it, how do you gauge success, and how would you recommend to a younger starting off coach how to gauge success?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, and I think every person really has to dig deep and ask themselves this same question, Warren. So I'm glad you're asking it of me. For me, it's really easy right now because I've thought deeply about this. So for me, currently, it could change in a year, it could change in two, but currently is how much can I actually impact growth of the game in my direct area, and how much can I impact retention? And I briefly want to share how it's changed. I mean, if you talk to me 5 years ago, not to mention 10 years ago, it would be very different. I would probably be looking just directly at getting to some sort of pro level of the game. My life experiences have obviously shaped a lot of what I've seen, but here's what I would say to close that loop off a little bit. I'm okay with that right now because I think the second part to what how I define success is to be comfortable in terms of what how I'm impacting the game. So I'm very comfortable in what I'm doing. I'm very comfortable in saying yes. I'm very comfortable in saying no. So whenever I do get to work in soccer right now, going back to life work balance, I feel like I'm giving 100%. So when I'm giving 100%, I always feel like I'm being successful and impacting the game.
Oh, perfect. And kind of to play off that a bit, I always thought that I found the best, I always felt the most joy out of passion what I do is when you actually find that one that comes back and says thank you. That you've actually made a difference in somebody's life or in their growth and how they developed as a coach. And so to me, that's always been one of the biggest impacts because I did the same thing. Chase had a PDL club there in West Texas, and that was fun. But my gosh, when I was passing my wife in the deal because she was coming home from work when I was going to work, and it was nuts. I mean, it's just insane. But that never brought fulfillment. But like you
Yep,
said, when you get the farm and you get to go back and enjoy nature and actually raising livestock and growing your own food and all that kind of stuff. It's so powerful and so relaxing, and it just gives you a chance away because I got to agree 100%. If it's all soccer all the time, that it's not sustainable. It
it
just can't
isn't.
keep going.
I know I'm talking to another soccer professional just hearing just how busy and how overwhelmed we feel at times. So absolutely fully in line with you.
So as you start to go in time now, because you know that's always a possibility, because I know you're a very driven individual, and being driven sometimes leads to that same mistake where you almost go back to doing those things. Do you find yourself at times having to pause now and say, look, maybe this is too much, or I got to back off, or do you say, oh, I'm doing it again, or how do you kind of relate to that?
Yeah, Warren. So first, I think you're have a second career in radio here because these are awesome questions. So look, absolutely. As a matter of fact, so I've been here in Tennessee 4 years. So I'm going to answer this in two ways. Number one, absolutely. I find myself coming back to this question because, I do consider myself a pretty driven person, and I not only want to succeed in this job, but keep on growing professionally. So, what I found very quickly is exactly what you said, is I've created in some sense time for myself, but every month, every year now, there's new layers, new responsibilities added, but there's still only 24 hours in the day. So very quickly, I would say within the 4 years I've been here, maybe 2 to 3 times, I've had to really reevaluate how I'm going to structure my own work-life balance again, being here, simply because my professional life was getting to the point where I was already moving in the direction of dedicating all my time towards there. So I'm going to start off with that, but the second part is that I'm very comfortable having that conversation not only with myself and my family, but also with my boss, with Hans. And I think that's an equally important part of what I'm going to say here because I think again, without the culture that he has created here at Tennessee and just the overall environment of openness, it would make it much harder to be able to take a step back, look, okay, how do I reshift myself so I'm still giving 100% to work and I can still give 100% to my home life, whatever that is it my farm, my family, my friends, whatever it be. So look, just to be really clear on this, yes, I think even when you find balance, especially if you're somebody that wants to be successful in whatever you do, I think you need to also find the time periodically to take a step back, take a deep breath, and again, reevaluate. Where are you? Is this where you want to be? Are you given enough time to the things that you think are actually important in life? And if not, don't be afraid to rework and restructure again. And like I said, I've probably done it 3 or 4 times since I've been here, and I only think it's made me better again in work and in my personal life as well.
Perfect. And then kind of play off the whole mentor thing. How much do you see your family? Because I know you talk about a lot of the family, both your parents and your brother. Have they been kind of helping guide that? Do your parents see it when it starts to fall off track a bit? Do they bring a different perspective, help guide you in that process?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I give my parents, my brother, just my direct inner circle a lot of credit for during those periods, 5 or 6 years ago when it was where I was burning out and it was much darker times in terms of how I was facing day-to-day life within my profession. So I think they've always been there, and I think having gone through a process like that and me being open about talking about it allows them to support me much better. So yeah, they're always open about it. If they see me kind of moving in the direction like, hey, we're barely seeing you anymore, even though you work a lot from the house, right? Um, it kind of snaps me back to reality again real quickly. But um, I maybe failed to say this earlier, Warren, but I don't think any of these things are possible without a solid support system. So I'm glad you brought me back to the whether you're, dedicating to work, finding that life balance, you need to have some sort of support system because nothing is able we're never able to fully accomplish everything simply by ourselves. So support critical.
Now let's flip the other way. Have you had people you can think of, and obviously you don't have to name names, that actually drawing you darker or deeper into the other round, were still pushing you harder through expectations, or their support was in the other direction where they're almost pushing more and more to get more out? And do you have those people you can think of as well that kind of drove you away from
Yeah.
your goals?
Yeah, and but I think if I'm honest with myself, or where I currently am right now, I'm not surrounded by individuals like that for two reasons. Number one, my day-to-day job with Tennessee, again, going back to that culture, I don't think it would ever accept that type of individual, right? I think it's a very the 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 association itself has an innate understanding that the more balance we all have, the better off we're actually going to be in our jobs. However, outside of that, obviously, I'm still doing a lot of other soccer things, but this is what I will say. I think in society is moving more and more in a direction where this is becoming more common. So there's more acceptance of, okay, we need to also understand that people have lives away. But I've also done a really good job of cutting out people that I don't think have the same value or same mindset as I do. And very simply, this is probably the big one. I credit myself that I think I finally learned to say no. And learning to say no is a very powerful tool.
That was way huge. And I was thinking more back towards when you look back to the time when you were in Corpus Christi, having the business. I mean, I can imagine the weight of owning the business, first of all, to make sure it's getting successful and going on, but it would drag you further and almost closer to that slippery slope to where you could see yourself going down that path.
Yeah, yeah. Look, I think that's exactly the snowball effect that I was in at one moment, Warren, and I think you hit it on the head, especially when you bring the business aspect to just the success you want to have as a soccer coach just in general. It brings two different sides, and obviously the economic side is always something that brings a lot of worry. So just very briefly, yes, I think that was a major contributor to leading me down a pathway of burnout. And I think just also the added responsibility as businesses start growing, um, you're responsible for a lot of people too, and a lot of people are dependent on you. So I think just that, and I don't have to tell you that if it was just the soccer side alone, I probably would have already been working 12-hour plus days. So when you add anything else onto that, it just starts spreading you so much more thin.
Okay, and then to kind of one final thing is just I'm thinking about it. Are there any things that you would stand out? So let's take, for example, going down that snowball effect. Are there certain signs that you might give somebody that was listening on the call, say, oh yeah, this was like the first thing that started hitting me? I started to say, oh, the warning signs, if you will, that led to that change to get to Tennessee.
Yeah. Warren, I'm going to give you two because this is something that I've really had to think a lot just to protect myself from getting in a situation like that again. So, the number one thing, and I did not figure these things out, I want to be very honest here, until after. When these things were happening, it's almost like you're just so busy, you're going with the flow. But the two things are number one, I stopped finding the joy in my training sessions. Like I would die to go to training at night with my kids and it would be ready. When I look back, I got to a point where I almost had to like psych myself out to go into training. That's not a good sign, right? When we're in training, if we're coaches, that should be almost our release. So I think that was the number one red flag. And then the second red flag for me in terms of burnout was that the support system and the people that I really depended on and helped me long term, I started withdrawing away from them. And again, I probably wasn't as aware in the moment as I am now, but that in hindsight was something that should have immediately told me something is up here. You know, you're very close to these people. These are the people that have been with you through thick and thin. We need to reevaluate. So those two things, and to this day, I think as soon as I'm even inching in any one of those directions, it's an immediate reevaluation, and it's helped me tremendously.
That's way powerful. I can think that that could go beyond just even the work-life balance. When you think about maybe, toxic relationships or something like that, I think both those points hit it specifically on the head. Wow. All right, I couldn't ask for two better things. With that, let's open up to any questions that anybody else might have. Well, I got to be online, and we'll see if they'll pop off here in a second.
Definitely.
And it looks like it's my old math class. He has questions that nobody's asking, but hey, I want to take a second and say thank you very much for joining us, man. What a powerful! I really enjoyed this. This is maybe one of my favorites for sure, because I think you brought
Or
a lot of powerful ideas to this thing. This was really neat, and I think a lot of people get a lot out of it. I mean, like I said, what a great story, what a great journey, and thank you so much on behalf of North Texas for joining us on this webinar. And like I said, I look forward to many more as we start to work together more closely between the two associations.
thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And with that, I'll close out this round. We'll see everybody here pretty soon. We'll be sending out the new links for the upcoming webinars. With that being said, thanks again, and we will see you guys all soon.